Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Black Doctoral Network's Conversation Starters web series. I'm your guest host, Dr. Tasia White, and I'm really excited about the topic that we are discussing today. So today we will be having an informative conversation on a new workplace landscape, remote work now and beyond. And we have four lovely panelists who will be helping us with understanding what this looks like, again, now and beyond. And so with that said, I will be introducing our four panelists. So first we have Dr. Doreen Hatcher. Dr. Hatcher has served as a university administrator with a passion for helping students transition to college through meaningful engagement, while also finding a balance between work, school, and life. Currently, Dr. Hatcher is a director of student transition and engagement programs at Cal State Channel Islands. Dr. Hatcher holds a journalism degree from the University of Texas, a master's degree in management from the University of Phoenix, and a doctoral degree in educational leadership from Fresno State University. Her doctoral research focused on gendered racial experiences of Black women students in Hispanic serving institutions. Welcome, Dr. Hatcher. All right, great. So next we have Dr. Miriam McCleary, a professor of biology and the chair of the Department of Biological Science at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Dr. McCleary received his Bachelor's of Science in Marine Science from Richard Stockton State College of New Jersey, now known as Stockton University, and received his PhD in zoology from Duke University. Dr. McCleary is a physiological ecologist. He is interested in how behavior and physiology influences ecology, and how the environment influences behavior, physiology, and ecology. Welcome, Dr. McCleary. Okay, next we have Dr. Kendra Lewis Strickland. Dr. Lewis Strickland earned her Doctorate of Education in Organizational Leadership and Higher Education Leadership from Grand Canyon University. Her dissertation empowered Black women to share their leadership resilience experiences to inspire and support aspiring Black women leaders. Her passion for leadership and organizational development is fueled by the workforce's diversification and ensuring individuals and institutions are agile and capable of navigating conflicting and evolving ideals. She has more than 8 years of experience directing programs that build leadership, professional, and skills capacities for students, alumni, and community members. She is currently the program manager at the Big Ten Data Hub in the Institution of Data, Engineering, and Sciences at Georgia Tech. Welcome, Dr. Lewis Strickland. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Ashley Campbell. Dr. Campbell is the Director of EDI, Integration, Education, and Programming with the Office of Equity and Inclusion at the University of Rochester. She is also a managing partner for the company Third Eye Network, an innovative multicultural networking, management, and media consortium. She is an academician, an entrepreneur, and a higher education administrator with more than 10 years of progressive higher education experience, as well as nonprofit work. Dr. Campbell is dedicated professional adept to creating dynamic, culturally responsive spaces for all people. Welcome. I'm so glad that you have been able to join us for today's conversation.
Thank you.
So,
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So with that said, we will start with our first question, and I will pose it to Dr. Hatcher first, and then Dr. Lewis Strickland, if you could follow behind. So the first question is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic influenced the workplace environment?
Okay, thank you. That's a great question to start off with. I work at an institution, and so it was very challenging to just take everything and put it online when COVID first hit last spring. And then we worked very hard on, developing programs and processes for the last year. Um, one of the programs I oversee is new student orientation, and so we have students who are just now seeing the campus for the first time. And so the way that it has influenced our workplace environment is that for me, it's been difficult because we still have a large portion of students who are remote. And so for the students who are on campus, they're in certain areas. And so the building that I'm in is like the hub of the campus, but I don't get to see very many students because they're not in here. And then it's also been very challenging for my team because although we're here in person, I'd rather still meet on Zoom because I can't see their face, with the mask. So that's been very challenging to make that adjustment and, still walk around with the mask on, social distancing, and just trying to, be wary of things that we used to do before we don't do anymore, and how that's affecting morale and wellness for the staff too.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Lewis Strickland, and then next I will have Dr. McClary and then Dr. Campbell.
Yeah, again, thank you for having me. Just small correction, I work for the South Big Data Hub at Georgia Tech. So no problem. It's a lot of work. And for us, it's been a little different. So in my particular role, we have, at my particular role, we are a regional entity funded by the National Science Foundation, focused on broadening participation in data analytics and science. And so our reach is not only institutional wide, but it's also regional wide, and we have partnerships across the country. So for us to go remote was not a big shift for us because we were already doing that because of partners, right? We were already working on Zoom, connecting. We're a smaller team anyway with co-locations. So we were kind of doing the Zoom thing anyway. We were going into the office to Zoom. So there was a little challenge with that. For us, though, our environment, honestly, I can say that my supervisor and I, like I said, we're a very small team, and we spend most of the time on Zoom talking. We honestly probably talk more now than we did in the office, because when you're in the office, there's various distractions. You're working on your project, but then somebody is working on a project, and you got to jump out and ask them a question. So there's a lot of distractions. Not saying there isn't at home as well, but I think we're a little bit more intentional about how we work because we're both working moms. And so we're very intentional about how we work and the energy and boundaries of which we place on each other and that we place on partners as well. And I think for us, that's been a blessing. Now there is a bit of Zoom fatigue. I think that's with anything. You go from a 30-minute face-to-face to now let's just get everything crammed into an hour and a half. But with that, I think there has been a lot of grace and honesty, and more communication has had to evolve, because now you have to give somebody a little bit more grace. If they say they can't meet, well, they probably can't meet because they're either on another Zoom or they've got to pick a kid up or an elderly parent. So there's this little bit of humility that's being brought back into the workplace that at one point was taken out of it. My dissertation and program are in organizational leadership. So very much this has been an interesting example of what can happen when we have communication, boundaries, standards, and procedures about how we can all communicate. And that was something that me and my team did very early on. We kind of said, what are the personal parameters that we're dealing with, as well as what are the projects we need to take on? And I think in that, we've been more honest about what we can do, how well we can do it. And we've, in my opinion, become more productive because now we are actually not pressured into saying, okay, I have to go after this grant. Well, no, you don't have to. We can actually shift what this grant may look like and propose it in a different way so that it's more beneficial and still meet the goals. So I think there's a lot of communication that came out of it. But for us, there really was not a lot of change. In the research arm at Georgia Tech, we are our one institution. So for individuals in a lab, it was a little difficult. They had to figure out social distancing in a lab. But for a lot of times, it was better because they got to work more on team projects, meaning in smaller group work. So it forced them to actually talk more and not find ways to sneak off in little corners and do work. It forced them to communicate more about organizational structure.
Thank you. It's interesting to see those different dynamics shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Campbell, how have you experienced this from your perspective?
So first, I know we having a conversation and all that good stuff, but I do have to acknowledge my Sora. So hello, Sora, and I hope you are doing well.
Hello. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
we got a family reunion going on here. Okay. So with that, honestly, the pandemic kind of hit us hard. And so I'm, speaking from an institution, upstate New York. And at the time, my staff was more on the seasoned population side or age demographic. And it was a little bit of a struggle trying to transition individuals from PCs at their desk to trying to make sure they had the appropriate equipment in their homes. And that was a little bit of a struggle. However, I'm grateful for certain team members who were able to quickly just kind of figure out what are we going to do to make sure people had the resources that they needed to be functional at home. And even actually saying, I'll take some time to travel to wherever these individuals live to make sure things were hooked up correctly and things like that, which was a risk in itself to even say that they wanted to do that. And so for us, it took us that initial hump. March of 2020 was like, oh, okay, this is a bit much. We really need to adjust as quickly as possible. But once we got into the groove of things, I'm really excited that the team that most individuals across the institution said, oh, because they're so old, and I'm just using that terminology, that colloquialism, they didn't have faith in them. And so they just assumed that the staff was just going to quit. But honestly, it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened because it really challenged the group, in particular, to say, you know what, I'm going to learn how to use this tool called Microsoft Teams. I'm going to learn how to really effectively engage with Zoom and Box and all of these different things, and really kind of move away from a paper process, because we were inundated with paper in HR. And now it's like, okay, you're gonna have the electronics, use the digitized version of this. So it was really good to actually see them build that confidence within themselves to be able to transition forward. And I know we have some other questions, and I can share what some of the challenges have been, kind of dealing with some of the additional nuances that have come into play. So.
Yes, please save that for a later question. Okay, Dr. McClary, are you able to speak to this topic of how the COVID-19 pandemic has influenced your work environment? Oh, unfortunately, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, okay, there we go. I was muted. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. When the pandemic first happened, Fairleigh Dickinson University was on a complete lockdown. And so we basically were on spring break. When spring break was over, they said, don't come back. And so what we did, it was totally remote. We had a little bit of training, but it definitely was a learning curve. But I'm also the chair of my department. So in some ways, it was sort of good because we have a community printer, and it's by my office. So as chair, every time someone goes to pick up a document, they'll bring you more issues than probably they need to. But being remote, it lessened only the most important things came to me rather than the day-to-day everything. So it kind of worked out well for me in that regard. And in terms of teaching, they provided training that summer, and that fall we started off online, and so it was a little bit smoother then because everyone was used to it. We are actually back now, but even though we're back in terms of classes, in terms of being in the workplace, not many people are here at least at the same time. We're here in spurts, so it's sort of like a little bit of a disconnect. Like you may see, if you have a same teaching schedule as someone else and you're off at the same time, you'll see them, but you won't see everyone at the same time like before. And it's good as if you're a chairperson, because only the most important things reach you rather than everything.
Absolutely, definitely an adjustment in terms of that communication piece.
Yes, that's for sure.
Okay, so thank you all for answering that first question. So for my next question, how have public policies influenced remote or hybrid organizational structure and processes? And I will start with Dr. Lewis Strickland first, and then go to Dr. Campbell. Oh, Dr. Lewis, we can't hear you.
Yes, the mute button, right? We're here in Atlanta, and so for us, the public kind of policies around Atlanta have been very vague and very non-existent in some instances. And so it was very much left up to local businesses, local institutions, that sort of thing. So the system of Georgia really, they created like a task force and really kind of talked to faculty, staff, and students about really what is it that we can do? Because just like everybody else, we got hit out of nowhere. 1 minute students were in school, the next minute don't come back, and now everybody's kind of in a panic. My particular role is in research, and so we're not student facing, but that does not mean that we don't interact on some level with students, whether they're postdocs, whether they're doing undergraduate research assignments, what have you, student groups, that sort of thing. And so for us, it was very, on one hand of my job, it was challenging because we have a very flat structure. So in a way, people were looking for, what's the answer? What are we supposed to do? They were looking for a response. But because my office is very a flat structure and the institution is very hierarchical, no one had an answer to share. So it was just like, we're waiting on someone to tell us an answer. Then that person was waiting on someone to tell them an answer. And then it was like, well, we're waiting on the government to tell us. And then there was no answer. And so there was this, it was a moment where it was just kind of, we were just working at home and hoping that someone would finally have an answer. And I think for us, I finally just said, okay, what is it that we can do? Let's look at our office. Let's look at our team. What do we need to get done for the rest of the semester? Let's do that. The rest of it of trying to figure out what are we going to do in the summer, we're going to figure that out when we get there. Right now, we have things going on that we need to kind of figure out. So I am the liaison with the operations team. So kind of helping comms figure out what are they doing and how can we help comms? Okay, then our admin staff, what is it that you need? How can we connect those dots? And okay, well, the hub in Columbia is now doing something different. So how do we connect those dots? So in a lot of ways, for our internal team, the executive director and myself said, okay, what are our strengths? Let's have a conversation. Our executive director said, I'll take on a certain role, and then you take on the herding the cats, and let's get it done. And I said, well, all right, I can do that. Organizational leadership, here I go. And through that, I knew we didn't have certain policies. So it was a conversation with the various members of the team to say, what is it you need? What is it you're working on? How can we best support you in whatever you're working on? So things that we kept saying, oh, we need a policy for that. We need a procedure for that. But maybe we're moving on to another project or a new solicitation came out. So we had to go for that. You just never got to it. At this point, it almost forced a stop that we had to get to it to answer these questions in order to actually be productive. So it was about, it was a couple weeks. It was trying to get everybody on one schedule to have these conversations, but it was truly a sit down where we said, okay, nobody is giving us the answer. It's not trickling down. For us, it wasn't. So what is it that we need to do? How can we best do this? And we had very honest conversations. At first, people were very nervous to share what their expectations were for working from home, setting those boundaries. And I admit that sometimes I was in that same boat. But finally, after having a child, I was like, no, my boundaries are this and this, and I can do this in this time for my sanity. I can do this. And at the time when we went remote, I was finishing my dissertation. I was about to have my daughter. It was just too much kind of going on. And for my own selfish way, I needed to know what the policy and procedure was. And in a way, me kind of pushing it and pushing our executive leadership team to say, hey, what are you thinking? They were able to now have these conversations. And I was able to kind of prompt people to come in with what their desires and needs were. And so in that way, that's kind of that program management part, right? It's not only making the operational pieces go, but making the people behind the operations go. And so making sure that we were having an honest conversation about what we needed to get done, what was realistic that we could get done, what did we commit to, and what could we commit to in the future with uncertainty, and how long could we sustain that. And so that conversation wasn't finite. That conversation is still ongoing because we've had to shift the way programs are. We've had to shift. We have programs that work with primarily Black institutions, HBCUs, HSIs, MSIs, and we really found out there's some accessibility challenges there. So how Georgia Tech responded to certain issues, we understood that some of our more underrepresented institutions couldn't respond in that same way. So they couldn't participate in programs in the same way. So it really caused us to sit down and say, okay, how can we still help people, still help with their accessibility? It helped us to reach out to different partners. We really kind of relied on our partner program to say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Who's got the skill set for that? And a lot of people were still fumbling and trying to figure it out themselves, but they wanted to help. So there was a lot of communal building in that. So coming out of that with that not so clear direction from the top, it forced almost like a middle up, middle down kind of management style, organizational structure for me to really think about what is it that executive leadership really wants to get done, being due realistically, and coming to a middle ground with that. So the inability to provide an answer forced us into action.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Sounds like, flexibility is the key.
You gotta be agile. You gotta
Yep.
be.
Absolutely. All right. So Dr. Campbell, if you could share next.
Absolutely. So similar experiences in terms of what happened at the University of Rochester. I will say, though, it was interesting that early on, because of, and most people know how New York State was responding to the pandemic. It was almost as if we were the flagship state within the United States. And so it seemed as if the university allowed the state to drive a lot of the policies, and even a lot of the uncertainty too. Like it was almost as if we were just waiting for the governor to come out with another memo, and it was like, oh, okay, so now we're going to follow that procedure. But you could tell the angst within the institution, leadership, even middle management. We're like, so what we trying to do here? Because I'm not really feeling this remote working environment anymore. And people were anxious to be back together. And so we experienced the shift where we ended up having a task force, and that task force I'm a part of, but it primarily consists of senior leaders representing all of the distinct university areas. And it's interesting now to hear how the certain policies, certain itty bitty things become like these exaggerated debates of trying to really understand, do we want to stop this? Do we want to proceed with this? In particular, the vaccination requirement that many institutions implemented or mandated has caused all kinds of interesting rifts. And so recently we've had the requirement was by 9/27 that all employees and students had to actually be vaccinated. And there's that unspoken language of by June of the next year, if you don't have it, you might have to kind of consider somewhere else of where you're going to work. And so it still creates this interesting tension, because the main driver now is you have senior leaders who want everyone to be back in the workplace. And it's like, well, we can't have a whole bunch of people who just like, I just rather work remotely and be unvaccinated and be in my own space and just think I'm good. Nah, player, you, even if you are at home, you're gonna have to be vaccinated. And guess what? At some point, you're gonna have to come back into the office. So it's been that dynamic. And honestly, for me, I like to sit back and kind of watch the cultural dynamic kind of play out as well. I think that's really been the most intriguing of all of this, is that, you know, we can talk all day long about how Black and brown people are the ones that aren't necessarily getting vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting how mainstream culture, or the dominant culture, uses that as a way to, I guess, ignite the conversation to talk about employees. And I'm like, that's not even what's on the table. We're just having a basic conversation about employment and trying to understand, you know, what makes the most sense for all employees. So it's an iterative process. It's an ongoing conversation. And yeah, this whole environment has definitely caused us to really try to live in the shift, live in things kind of being uncertain, and be okay with not knowing, you know, what is going to be the next course of action. So.
Absolutely, getting comfortable with the unknown. Thank you. Dr. McCleary, are you able to also speak to this?
Yes.
Awesome.
Right. So I'm at Fairleigh Dickinson University, New Jersey, and we have two campuses in New Jersey. One where I'm at is Teaneck, Hackensack, closer to New York City, and the other one is in Florham, Madison, which is, I guess, south and west of this campus. And the policies were really driven by the state. And so what that meant, though, on the Florham campus, faculty members were, when we were able to go hybrid, this is after the complete lockdown, when we were able to go hybrid, faculty members on the Florham campus were more likely to do that. And those in the metropolitan campus, not so much. And that campus, in terms of biology, I'm a biologist, so I'm in the biology department. That campus, the faculty are a little bit younger, and my campus a little bit older. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But what happened was when the state said that if a course could be, if a course could be delivered online, this is when we were hybrid, it had to be given online. And so what that meant was, because we recently, these two campuses merged into one department. And so we have now the same course numbers. We didn't always, like prior to 2020 fall, we were totally different departments. We are now one department as of fall 2020. But what that meant was, if a faculty member on the Florham Madison campus wanted to teach it in person, but someone on the metropolitan campus wanted to teach the same course online, it had to be online, because the state said if it can be done online, it should be done online. So that forced more people online than wanted to be. And so now, though, that we are back in person, CDC had said the vaccines have come up. So first they required students to get vaccinated, and faculty, they were saying we couldn't enforce it. And what they would do, they kept polling faculty, are you vaccinated, or are you going to get vaccinated? And to get a sense of how many of the faculty are already vaccinated, and so we don't have to push as much. And so then it became, well, you have to be vaccinated, unless you have, and this is for students and faculty, some kind of religious exemption. And I know some students are doing that, but in either case, though, you have to wear a mask. I'm without a mask now because I'm in my private office. But if I had a shared office and someone was here, I would have to be masked even right now. So faculty members brought up, because when they brought up the fact that, well, what if the student pre-registered before the mandate that they must be vaccinated? Because this happened maybe like the end of the spring semester last year or summer, but pre-registration had already occurred. So a faculty member brought up, well, if they already pre-registered, can the university force them to get vaccinated then, or deregister them? And we're a private university. I don't see them deregistering students, because if they register and pay, they want that money. So, so I was like, that's a great question. So I asked the dean, and the dean said, well, we're trying to persuade them. So then faculty were like, at that time, we weren't mandated to wear masks if you were vaccinated. and they were saying, well, I'm going to wear a mask anyway. And then later on, they said you have to wear a mask even if you're vaccinated or not, unless you're in your private office or unless you're eating. So that's basically how it's been. And right now, we've had to do seating charts so that if a student gets sick, we know who is in a 6 foot radius. And we first thought, or we were told, that if someone gets sick, the whole class has to be online. But the university is trying to keep us in person. So what they said, no, the whole class is not going online, only the people within a 6 foot radius. So you have to have the seating chart, which we never had to do, and stick to it, So that's some changes that have happened. And faculty, like if a student says, I have symptoms, I'm going to get tested. And then faculty members find it, they don't like the fact that they can't really ask them, well, were you positive? Did you get vaccinated? But you understand why they want to know, because they're in the class. So we're still working through those issues. And I think those kind of things, faculty that are worried about that, don't show up in the office like for office hours. I've heard some faculty members say, I'm going to hold office hours outside. And they can do that as long as they have, or Zoom office hours. And I didn't say this earlier in the previous question, because we have 2 campuses in New Jersey and they're 45 minutes apart. When it comes to meetings, like the college meetings or meetings with the chairs, they're all been Zoom, because it is convenient when you have 2 campuses to meet. And because if you had to commute 45 minutes, you might not be able to make it. Now you can, because you just go to your office and open up your laptop or your phone. So meetings are all been, that I'm involved in, on Zoom, but classes are in person. And also, if a student is sick or quarantined, they don't want us to offer it to them as a hybrid, because they're trying to keep everyone in the classroom, and they think it's going to snowball. If you do it for this student, then you got to do it for more, and the more of them will sort of jump ship, so to speak, and go hybrid. Some students have asked faculty, we've taken we have a survey, and the class wants to be online. Will you do it? And they asked me as the department chair, and I said, well, the deans discouraged that. And the faculty member ended up saying, well, no, I can't do it. But they really didn't survey the whole class. They would say that. And then I said, the problem is, if you do it hybrid and it doesn't work out for certain students, they'll be the whistleblowers to complain. And the faculty member will be in trouble, because we're not supposed to go hybrid, even if someone's quarantined. So they're really trying not to have that occur. So that's basically how it's been for us. So it's very rigid instructions. The only thing it hasn't been as rigid, the grade schools in Jersey, well, they at one time, I don't know what they're saying now, but you had to have masks and be socially distanced. But so we're asking about, what about college? And they'll say, well, is there any social distancing? And they say, no, that's only for the grade schools. So basically, we're back like normal. And to my surprise, when we would do field trips and students have to ride in vans, they're okay being packed in with masks on. The students are, for the most part. Sometimes they're not, if they know there's a classmate who wasn't vaccinated. And they know more than we know, because we can't ask, but they tell, they're more of a tight unit. So they kind of won't sit near that person, or if I don't have that in my classes, but I've heard faculty members say that they stay away from those students that aren't vaccinated, for whatever reason it is. But I've let students sit where they want to sit. And some of them will sit right next to each other with a mask on, so they've been okay. It depends. Some other faculty members have said, I want you spaced out, if the room allows it, and where it's not allowed is the laboratories, because there's like only 18 seats at the most, maybe in some, or 16. So they are next to each other. That's where the students get upset, but we've had guidelines, and some things we figure out ourselves, but we're pretty regimented here in New Jersey and following the state, rules.
Understandable. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So for our next question, and Dr. Hatcher, I'm going to have you start with it. What are some of the benefits and challenges associated with working remotely?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll say when we first had to go remote, I was like, oh my God, I can't work from home. I'm not going to survive. I'm not going to make it, because I'm a very social person. And so that was a very, very hard thing for me to overcome. And then it became more challenging personally at home because as we went into that first summer, everybody got to watch me work at home because my kids are off and my husband's a professor. And so no matter how many little boxes I had on my screen, somebody was always asking me if I was busy. Can I do this? Can I look for something? Can I watch this TikTok video? So I had to make those adjustments. And then when the kids went back to school with a hybrid model in the fall, then that gave us a little bit more structure. But it was still, a challenge. So for me, I would say a benefit personally, and a lot of my colleagues share this, is just being able to be at home and be with our families. And one of the things that I'm noticing that some studies are coming out and people are being more vocal about is, working remotely kind of shifted the 9 to 5 workday. And so, it wasn't just about, oh, let me get up in my pajamas and I'm not, so is it not suitable for Zoom? You still got up and you did what you needed to do, but you were there and you were committed and you were focused. And then when you turn off your camera to go do something like do a load of laundry or whatever, that kind of gave you a nice break, and then it added to your work-life balance because you got something taken care of. So I would say that was a benefit for me. And I was also working on my dissertation. I was in an online program. So I was online all the time. So I would get up in the morning and I would sit down and I would do my work. And then my transition was to go take off my earrings, my jewelry, and change my clothes. Then I was a student. Then I go back and do whatever I need to do. So there are some benefits and challenges with that. And then in terms of, more global, you're meeting with your staff. So then I don't know if this is a benefit or a challenge. I think it was nice to see the human part of people at home because you could hear the dogs barking, you could see the kids in the background. And for me, a benefit that is now a challenge is when I got triggered about something, I turned my camera off. And I can't do that in person. And I'm still trying to figure out what the equivalent is. But so it's hard for me is getting back into the groove of things where I got to, I'm okay. I'm still in this meeting. I'm still present. But I'm thinking of some other ways of like, how could I put that screen back up? For my staff, it was, working out schedules, being mindful of, I think someone mentioned grace. I forgot which one of my solos said that, but it's extending grace to everybody. And but when we came back to work, when we repopulated, it was very jarring to see how quickly the university wanted to go back to Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Like you got up, you got dressed, you came to work to sit and Zoom. And we're Zooming because we don't have a space that's big enough for a whole department or area to meet. So we're still Zooming. We're still Zooming with students because some students aren't on campus. So that's been a challenge to show that for 18 months, we did what we did and the campus still survived. But now it's like you got to have butts and seats and you have to, be present to be on Zoom. So like right now, you can see I'm in my office, but I wonder with some people is like, okay, you got your background on, like, where are you? So a major issue for us coming back to work was transitioning the telework agreement. And now you have to have some act of God or medical or something to get, that approved when we had an emergency telework agreement and everything still worked out. So I think, I can't really draw the line specifically about this is a benefit or this is a challenge because it's still all related. And now they're calling it teleworking. So I may not be telecommuting from home, but I'm in my office and I'm teleworking because I'm meeting with students and I'm meeting with all kinds of folks via Zoom. So that in and of itself is a challenge to be able to work with my team. And I'm fine. They all have kids or they have all the responsibilities. So I'm very flexible. But there are some managers that are just like, you still need to be here Monday to Friday, from this time to this time. And a benefit also was we got to literally meet the students where they were. So I was able to really bring out the point that we had commuter students. Our campus was 75% commuter before the pandemic. So by us being remote, we were able to meet students literally on Zoom. We were able to have after hours meetings with them. I had meetings late in the evening, and it wasn't a bother because I didn't have to worry about staying in my office or driving home. I just got up, did what I did, and got off the meeting. So I think that also increased awareness of a different way of connecting and engaging our students. And the students appreciated it. You know, they didn't have to get a babysitter. I had meetings with students who were in their car on their way to work or home from work or whatever. So I think it's, I don't want to say it's a blessing and a curse, but you know, there's some light in the storm that we had, and I'm just hoping that there's a lot of things like what we do with the doctoral network that we're able to continue doing, you know, virtual stuff, because it's not just out of convenience. It's just, this is where we are now as a society.
Absolutely. Finding ways to continue this pattern because we've, you know, grown accustomed to it after all this time, to your point. So thank you. Dr. McCleary, you know, from your perspective, you know, what are the benefits and challenges associated with working remotely?
Right. Well, one benefit as a department chair was that I would, there's some faculty members that would bring everything to you, relevant, irrelevant, and because when you're in the office, you're sitting duck, and they pass by to go to the printer, they fire off of all these things. So what helped, the benefit was, if they were going to email, it would only be the really important things. They did have my cell phone number. I did get calls, really only one person, where I know if I was in the office, it would just be, you know, like you're there and they see you, okay, let me just unload now, you know, so it filtered those things out. So that was great. I love that part of it. The challenge was, I guess, my commute is 45 minutes with no traffic. Of course, there's always traffic. So about an hour one way. And so the challenge was staying at home. I didn't have that commute. So I'm working during that time, you know, and I'm the type, I always say yes, I don't really put boundaries up. So like you're going nonstop from class, and then in an instant a meeting, and you can get there in an instant. It's just a click of a button. And so then they would give you meetings back to back to back. So like you're kind of worn out in a different way, worn out sitting in your chair. You know, like you didn't even get any exercise because it's one thing, one right after another. And I was surprised that like when registering students, the enrollment services office, some of them would work because they're more 9 to 5. You know, as professors, you're salaried, you're not really 9 to 5. Oh, you can set those boundaries up. I usually don't, because I get so much email and I'm trying to dig out of the pile. So if I can address it now, that's one less thing later. But then you do that, here comes something else. But the people who work at enrollment services that do the registrations, they're mostly 9 to 5. Some of them were working beyond. I would be shocked. I would send this in thinking they'll deal with it tomorrow, and they would do it that night. So I was like, wow. So, but then when you do that, then the students expect more, and so they're constantly keep coming. So the challenge was, I would say, worked more because it was easy. It was able to do it. It was no commuting time, so it was just keep back to back and pile up, you know, and create with, as I'm sure we've all know now, the Zoom fatigue, you know, or whatever platform you were using. So that was the challenge for me. But the benefit was good though, not having to deal with as much problems that really weren't problems, but since you're there, I'm just gonna unload, you know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. So for our next question, what are some of the strategies to increase employee engagement in the remote workplace setting? And I will have Dr. Campbell start, and then Dr. Lewis Strickland go next.
Truthfully, it's been trying to create virtual engagements, right? So that's really been a thing that we've leaned into quite a bit. Some areas are a little better, they're stronger at it than others. But I would say that overall, when it's more of a culturally specific group that may be hosting something, it seems that as if that the energy has been high. It seems as though that people really appreciate that. And so I have experienced some departments who have created, like, you know, create a mocktail and, you know, come to your Zoom meeting. And that has really kept engagement kind of high. Sadly, for departments where managers or directors weren't necessarily as didn't really have a personality. And it doesn't matter if you're introvert or not. It's just don't really have a personality. It would always seem a little dry, and so it kind of made a really very strong statement to say that, wow, culturally we're not vibing, we're not on on the same page here. And so it's been interesting, but I will say that we have definitely leaned into those virtual celebrations a little bit more, trying to change up your virtual background and things of that nature, just to kind of play and have some fun. Yeah, so that's where we are.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Dr. Lewis Strickland?
Yeah, so I'll talk departmentally and then institutionally. One, I think anytime we're talking employee engagement, I think we need to gauge what that means for your group, right? So if your group is one who wants to have mocktails at meetings, hey, have at it. Some groups may not really be trying to do that. And so it's about figuring that out. And so departmentally, again, we're like a center inside of a center. So we have a very small team. We're small but mighty. And for us, I think our executive director posed that question and said, okay, how can we be more engaging? And our team was like, we're fine with our team meetings. And our team meetings went a little long because that was an opportunity for us to kind of just chat and say, hey, and my kid wrote on my wall today, or my husband locked the keys in the car while they were running. So we had that time to do that. And that was what some people needed. But then it kind of led into, okay, this is what we need to go over. And so the meetings were a little bit more fluid. It had a hard agenda because we need to get through things, but it was very much an opportunity to engage in that. So for my team, that was kind of the engagement we needed. For us, a lot, whether it be working spouses and you're helping with kids, or you're trying to do school, or the baby's crying, whatever it was, a lot of times it was, okay, we have this dedicated hour. Well, how's it going? And I always stop, or start the meeting saying, okay, let's do a mental check-in, where you at? And so that can be a moment where you can just share, I'm struggling. I've had coworkers say, I'm struggling. I can't even get through this project. I need help. Oh, okay. Well, what do you need help in? So that was a way for them to, one, let down the guard and say they need help. Then it allowed for everybody else to kind of pitch in their own instance. And I'll say a benefit, and as I segue into institutional engagement, has been that conferences and workshops and things have moved virtual. So there hasn't been this existing competition between meetings and activities, because you can very well be on two Zooms at once. I don't suggest it, but you could. Or you could, maybe there's a plenary going on at a conference that you're not that interested in. So now you can take a meeting, or now you can address something that needed to be addressed. So a benefit of that has been types of professional development. So departmentally, I have very much encouraged my coworkers to become institutionally engaged in this time. Meaning, we get so bogged down in our research. We get so bogged down in the finances of it, in the partnership building, community building, that oftentimes we forget to build institutional community because we're just kind of siloed in that way. And so I very much encouraged my team. I'm a part of the staff council, a subcommittee where we're focusing on building an employee career development center for individuals who are non-staff or non-faculty, I'm sorry. So, non-tenured as well. And so I very much encourage them, get involved with the ERG, employee resource groups, get involved in those types of things. So where we would say, well, we're in the heart of Atlanta, getting on the trolley to get to campus, it's 25 minutes. It's too much. I could be doing, I can work on this. There was that kind of excuse that was there with being on a very large campus of saying it's too far in between meetings, whereas now they don't have that excuse. So I very much encourage them to use this as a time to develop those skill sets that you didn't have time to develop, that you didn't have time to, you always wanted to know what this type of job was like. Oh, well, set a meeting with that person. So now that you can have that call during the day and no one's asking you where you are or what's going on, you can have those conversations. And so institutionally, I think Georgia Tech has tried to do a really good job of ramping up the employee resource groups, the resilience groups, the self-care groups. They do yoga on top of roof buildings. They do all kinds of things, anything like that. And then there's a program of which this year I'm a diversity and inclusion fellow, where you have to propose a project and you work on that. And Plug, I'm working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and data science. Anybody interested, let me know. But yes, yes. And so there are people who propose projects to do additional engagement activities. So although my department and my unit is fairly small, my center is small, and we have said for us engaging a few minutes before a call or a few minutes after a call is good for us. We all try to have our cameras on so we can giggle a little bit and laugh. That's what we wanted. That works for us. We feel engaged. We walk away at the end of the week saying, I feel like I've talked to you 3-4 times this week. And, so you kind of still know what's going on in that person's life, and it allows them to share what they want to share, but at the same time, I have very much encouraged them to become institutionally engaged. Find out, don't let the excuse now be, I don't have time to go if you're interested in LGBTQ activities or if you're interested in the athletics department. Go figure that out. So I think there's 2 levels of that engagement. It's allowed me to be more engaged. It's allowed me to grow. But at the same time, there was a conversation about what does engagement look like for us? And we use that definition to define how we move forward.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. So for our next question, I will ask, each of you to kind of share briefly, how can leadership best support the transition to the remote workplace setting? And Dr. Hatcher, I will have you start first. Oh, if you can please unmute so that we may hear you. Okay, so Dr. Campbell, are you able to speak to this topic?
Absolutely. So honestly, the best answer I can say is for leadership, it is okay. It is completely okay to not know what to do. It is completely okay for things to not be like they used to be. It's completely okay for things to not go back to whatever you perceive normal to be. And to accept and embrace the change. And even in me saying that, I know that is like the hardest pill to swallow, because change is like, you want me to do what? Like that is the visceral reaction to any time someone offers the word change in a sentence. Someone says, okay, we're going to have a change management process. We're going to do like literally, it's almost as if there is you have heart palpitations. And I think honestly, that is what leadership can do to best support the transition to even entertaining a remote working environment, is being okay with embracing change and recognizing that you're not losing anything in the process. So it's what we gain in the end. So that is kind of like my base answer that I will share to that question.
Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Hatcher, are you able to answer this question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Sorry about that. As I alluded to earlier, some of that was coming down from the top about how can you best help your, the employees transition. And when you are putting in so many boundaries and requirements as if we didn't have this handled over the last 18 months, that wasn't very helpful. And then so also being mindful of, again, Grace, can't say that enough, but just where people are physically in their spaces. We're fortunate with my team that we have individual offices. So everybody's able to, be in their space without their masks on. And then I mentioned earlier too, even though we're all still here, I'd rather stay in a Zoom space because I'd rather see everybody's faces. And so I've been very supportive of schedules. I walk in the office, the building, I go to my office and I sit. And, I have access to everybody's calendars. I'm not checking it every day, I have, I don't go and knock on doors to see if somebody's here. So for my situation, I am very supportive, and I think that's what other people don't get. And I kind of get that from my supervisor to a certain degree. But then, there's the difference between middle management and then senior leadership. So I think, what works out for everybody, whether it's a baseball game or, you're still, you have little kids at home, or your partner went back to work, but you aren't, so you're doing these other activities. I think that's the best thing that you can do as a leader, is just recognize the humanness of it all, and just, support. Because in the same vein, we're doing that with students. We're trying to say, well, students need this and students need that, but it's like, can you turn the lens also to the employee, to the staff member who, needs to do a little bit more to make sure they're sane. My motto, or my image that I keep using lately, is the we've lost pressure in the air cabin and you need to put the mask on yourself first. I keep forgetting to do that. And so I'm trying to be more mindful, especially right now, with being back at work. I was using my commute time to exercise and do walks in the morning. And so now I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I still do that? Well, the way I'm doing it is I get to work when I get to work. And I have stuff blocked off on my calendar. But if that means I had to take some extra time in the morning to get my walk on, that's what I did, because I come to work a happier person, and then I'm able to do my job. So I think it's walk the walk and talk the talk too. So that's I think just being very supportive. You don't just support; you have to be supportive.
Absolutely. That humility piece is so crucial. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so last but not least, I will have each of you answer this question. And I will actually start with Dr. McCleary. So the question is, how has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped to enhance your personal and or help to enhance you personally and or professionally? Sorry. So Dr.
Right.
McCleary.
Okay. Hi. Well, I just joined. So I would say first, I would thank the network for this opportunity. I didn't realize as a fairly recent member that I would have this opportunity. So I'm thankful for that, for exposure, and I've shared it to my friends on Facebook. Some of them are doctoral people as well, and maybe they are already part of it, or maybe it might help them to join. So as a new member, I know there's a lot. I see a lot of the conferences coming out, and that's something I definitely would like to participate in the future. As a department head, I'm quite busy, but I would say just exposure, and you can see the ability to network, and so that's something that's really that I cherish, and I think that is a great way to enhance someone personally and professionally. It's just for the exposure and the opportunity to reach out and connect with others.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Hatcher, how has the Black Doctoral Network helped you?
Oh, it's been a godsend for me, because again, I said I'm a social person, and I think when I stumbled across it from another colleague while in my cohort, I think the first thing I did was go to a few socials. And so just to be able to be around other educators, other scholars, Black folk who were, learning and educating themselves, and then also sharing. I appreciate the fact that it's not just for potential students. It's I have a space, I have a home now that I can continue to network and connect with other folks. And it's a safe space and Black excellence. I just enjoy it. And, I've participated in some other panels and conferences and presentations and such. So I highly recommend it. And I'm just very grateful for the opportunities to be part of this group.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Lewis Strickland.
Yeah, my doctoral program was online. And so, although that was a blessing for me and what I needed in the type of program I was looking for, there is a piece that is missing from doing online programs, completing online programs. You have a cohort and you have community, but maybe not in the same sense that you do at a traditional program. And so, for me, finding the Black Doctoral Network was a very important piece because I was looking to build community of people who look, sound, talk, have experiences similar to mine. I was also looking for a place that was not only focused on rigor. I talked about this in my interview that I did with the Black Doctoral Network, but to reiterate, I was looking for a place that I could have social experiences, but at the same time, where that it included rigorous activity, conferences, scholarship, these sorts of things. I was looking for both, and in my professional organizations, it was very much about the rigor. It's very about production and connecting in that kind of way. And then, of course, there's social organizations, and I wanted something that was in between. And so for me, I've been a member maybe a year now, and it has been great. I've presented at regional conferences with Black Doctoral Network. I'm going to present at the national conference later this month. I've connected with people who are interested in leadership studies, which is where my research falls. And we've had some very robust and conclusive conversations. And so that has been really great because I've been able to talk to them and we've been able to kind of put people in spaces that maybe weren't always open to us. And we've also been able to say, hey, have you heard about that journal? You need to produce in that journal. I don't know what you need to do, but you need to do that. So it's been able to have an encouraging place that was also where I could be social, where at the same time I could have rigorous conversation and not only enlighten others, but enlighten myself. So I think the Black Doctoral Network is, again, a safe space. Like Sora said, it is definitely a place that I plan to continue to be at. And I definitely want individuals who are interested in becoming, entering doctoral programs to really join and learn from individuals who have completed and who have gone on to faculty postdoc position or all academic careers, and those who are more seasoned in their career to come back and do panels, talk, those sorts of things, because I think this is a place where we can grow that small percentage of us that have a doctoral degree and be able to support each other and push each other to do more than what we thought we could. Sometimes you just need the family cookout to tell you you got it. And that's kind of how I feel when I have these conversations.
Excellent. I love that, the family cookout.
That's what it is.
All right. Last but not least, Dr. Campbell.
Yes, I'm just going to add to what has already been shared, and I would not be me if I don't share that. Yes, the Black Doctoral Network is definitely the family cookout and some. You cannot beat the just the access and the reach to be able to connect with people who are very similar to you. And as Asura has already shared, who sound like you, who move like you, who see the world similar to how you see it, and all that good stuff in between. And this network truly gives us that it's a net that actually works. And so regardless of whether you're actually attending a conversation like this or a regional conference or a national conference, it is just unimaginable the things that actually happen. And I think, early on I'm a oldie but newbie with the Black Doctoral Network. And early on, I felt like I was like the only one from my area who was excited about, BDN. And then I came back to Rochester and I was like, all y'all are coming with me. And it was so empowering to see and to feel several of my colleagues and sorority sisters who would say, we going back to the network. We're going back to the conference, and we have a lot of fun. And honestly, because of those connections, we have group chats, we have email exchanges, we have virtual meetups and things of that nature to really be able to hold one another accountable and support one another through this process. And so that's not a thing that you can just walk around the corner and just have instantly. And the Black Doctoral Network is truly an opportunity to provide that avenue for us in a structured but unstructured way all at the same time. And so this is definitely the family cookout and some. So I'm definitely proud to be a member of the organization.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, each of you. And so at this time, I will also ask that we share your contact information so that anyone who would like to get a hold of you are able to reach out to you directly. Um, and with that, I thank you for being part of this conversation and just sharing your experiences and your insight in terms of, understanding this new workplace landscape. So thank you so much. And I would also like to thank our guests who, our viewers who have been listening to this wonderful conversation. I'm hopeful that you took something helpful from this conversation that you could maybe implement yourself or, able to bring back to your institutions or your work environments. So thank you all for sharing and thank you all for listening. And we will be back here next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. For the next conversation starters. And so for each person, I'm going to call you so that we can share your contact information. So we will start with Dr. Campbell first.
Okay, so you can contact me via my Gmail account, which is viewable at the screen, bottom of the screen. And then my IG is Ashley Nicole, PhD. And I'm definitely always interested in having dope conversations via that platform.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. McClary?
Yes. I'm using my phone now as my, there we go. It shows on the screen now, right? So my email address, McClary at fdu.edu. Twitter is there at Marian_McClary. And my IG is same thing, at Marian_McClary. I just use my name. So nothing fancy, but thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Hatcher?
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us. You can reach me via email at doreen.hatcher@csuci.edu, where I work. You can follow me at Twitter, dmhatcher13, and I also am very active with LinkedIn, and you can search me at Doreen M. Hatcher.
Excellent. Thank you. And Dr. Lewis Strickland?
Yeah, so I've got my email here down at the bottom. Feel free to email me. I enjoy conversating. I enjoy having conversations about keeping us all accountable on whatever we're doing. I do have my Twitter there. I'm gonna get better at using Twitter, I promise. So follow me so that it forces me to do more with Twitter. But I am on LinkedIn, so continue to connect with me there. I love connecting with people and learning from individuals, even if it's just by the content you post. And even if it's just by you posting someone else's content and me learning through that. So feel free to reach out to me and we can just have great conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your contact information. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here this evening and have a great night.
Thank you.